Is the Minneapolis City Council responsible for what's going on there right now? I found this interesting legal concept called state-created danger because the job of these people starts with public safety. And Minneapolis headlines are saying looks like a war zone. And this city's been having these problems. Wow. I mean, this is at the actual police station. And in the midst of all this chaos, the Twin Cities elected officials are pushing the limits of their power against ICE. Here's the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, this is the metro area. And when we think about Constitution, we usually think about the US Constitution, but the Constitution of the state that you live in is extremely important also. Okay, and check this out. Literally, Article 1, Section 1, the object of government of the Minnesota State Constitution is instituted for the security, benefit, and protection of the people. I thought it was an important detail that Section 2, basically the next sentence, says that you can't deprive any citizen of their rights under this Constitution. I mean, in constitutions, words matter, and they chose the word citizen. And the state of Minnesota basically gives the city of Minneapolis the right to govern. And in the Minneapolis City Charter, they have a whole section on police. In that section, they literally say that the city council must fund a police force with a specific mathematical formula for the number of officers. And in my research, the reason that the charter was set up this way is exactly so that politics could not get in the way of public safety. Well, it looks like politics is involved in public safety in Minneapolis. Here is the city council literally saying that they intend to dismantle the police department in 2020. So then what happens? There is a stark officer shortage in the Minneapolis police force. Okay, so a stark officer shortage, even though the city charter says the city council must fund a police force of a certain number. The irony is there's so few police officers that the ones who stayed have to work overtime, leading to a $30 million overtime police funding extra charge in 2024. So they don't have enough police officers, so the ones they do have to work overtime, and it costs the city $30 million. So instead of actually building a police force as is mandated by the Minneapolis City Charter, the city council is focusing on things like this separation ordinance, where they set up all these details about how they're going to resist ICE. And remember, what the obligations are of the city under the Minnesota State Constitution is the object of government is security. And this is going to come back because I think they should be sued. And the reason the object of government is security is because in the Federalist Papers, number 10, which is some of the founding documents of the way America sort of thinks and works, the idea is that you can't have the other benefits of liberty if you don't have security. These were the ideas of James Madison, the fourth US president, one of the founding fathers. What's Minneapolis doing for security? Repeat offenders here, out again. Oh, more repeat offenders being released onto the streets. So while the city council is focused on resisting ICE and they have a police shortage that is against their own charter, crime spikes. Well, there is a developing situation in the courts related to these cities and what they're doing to create dangerous situations with these types of honestly activist policies. And it looks like local governments can be held liable for not protecting the rights of the citizens in the municipality. There's a group of people in Seattle that sued the city of Seattle for basically letting riots proceed, and a federal judge in Washington held that the lawsuit can proceed because the city is creating a situation where the rights under the 14th Amendment Due Process Clause and the 5th Amendment are being violated of the citizens of Seattle. So is the city of Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota creating this situation? Well, when this ordinance forbids federal immigration agents from using city-owned parking lots, and the state of Minnesota is issuing a formal legal opinion that Minnesota law prohibits state and local law enforcement agencies from holding someone based on an immigration detainer. And what that means in plain English is that if the federal government has said, we're looking for this person, and then some part of the state of Minnesota's law enforcement has that person, the state of Minnesota will not hold that person for the federal government. Now, the reason that all that stuff is important is that forces all of ICE's activity out onto the street. They have to go do arrests of people in open air versus, for example, when you know that somebody that you're looking for is in a secure facility or when the city is interacting with them. The arrests have to be super public, driving all of this activity onto the street. Sounds a lot like state-created danger to me, and it looks like courts are starting to adopt the state-created danger theory, saying that if something like a municipality or a state creates a situation that places people at risk, they can be held liable. meaning that if these people create a situation that's super dangerous, the city of Minnesota can be held at fault and people who sue them can receive money as damages. And in these situations, you have to think of something like the Minneapolis City Charter as a contract between the city and the people who live in the city. And this contract says that the city council must fund a police force. So words matter in these things. It doesn't say should, it doesn't say should try to, it says the city council must fund a police force of a specific amount. So there's about 430,000 people in the city of Minneapolis, and there's the ratio. So that means that the police force must be about 730 people. But as of early 2025, they had about 150 police officers short. In fact, the requirement hasn't been met since 2021. The city council is literally breaking the contract. In fact, it looks like the mayor knows this, and so he vetoed a budget that they came up with, which directed $16 million to experimental new programs and took about $2 million away from the Minneapolis Police Department. And the city council was so progressive, activist, whatever, that they overrode his veto of their budget. Honestly, these people, they gotta own the situation legally. Because I actually looked it up, okay? And when you become a city council member in Minneapolis or any place in Minnesota, you have to make an oath of office. And in the oath of office, you affirm that you're going to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Minnesota. You're being elected to lead. And it looks like recently, if you made a priority 1 911 call in Minneapolis, so something like an armed robbery, like as urgent as it can get, it would take the police on average 15 minutes to get there. So that's the situation while you're dismantling the police department and focusing on resisting ICE. Sounds pretty state-created dangerous to me. So I think what's happening practically is that the city council is facing a lot of pressure from super activisty people in their cities. But honestly, you are a leader who has taken an oath to both the US and Minnesota Constitution. The Supremacy Clause of the US Constitution says that the US law is the supreme law of the land. The law of the land is the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996, which was signed into law by Bill Clinton. And here you are doing things to thwart the Constitution. And honestly, it's having disastrous consequences here. Now we've got another one. And it's not just disastrous for the citizens of Minneapolis, but also for the people that are there representing the federal government. A 1,300% increase in assaults against ICE, a 3,200% increase in vehicular attacks. These people are creating a war zone. And it looks like a lot of this stuff is the reason that the federal government is suing Minnesota. And honestly, I understand there are activist constituents that are putting pressure on these people because they either don't understand or don't care about the Supremacy Clause and the fact that this, signed by this guy, is the law of the land. But these people did take an oath to both the US and Minnesota Constitution, and they're clearly breaking that oath. So what do you think? Is this state-created danger?